Hey everybody, this is Ryan McClanahan with historythroughcards.com. Hope you're all doing very well today. So, not too long ago, I was on with Rahul from AIH Sports and Chris from Stories and Cardboard, and we were discussing a series of 1986 Flair Michael Jordan autographed cards that appear to be encapsulated, but they were fake, and they were delisted from the PSA platform. And this brings up a lot of questions, actually, and I had a few of my own. And you guys can go back and you can check out that video. Rahul actually had a recent video on this because there's been more potentially fake autographed cards that have slipped through PSA, and they've also been delisted. So it looks like there may be up to like 23 or 25 cards of Michael Jordan's 1986 Flair that are autographed or were autographed, and now they're delisted and they're pulled from the platform. That aside, I had mentioned something about the T206 Forgeries back in 2018, and right after I did this, one of the viewers actually contacted me and said that there was a break in that case. This is something that actually really bothered me from the very get-go, from the very beginning, for a few reasons. First, I am I am a collector of rare autographs, and for the most part, they're not like Ted Williams, Joe DiMaggio. They're not your superstar players, which tend not to really be all that rare. It's usually the guys like this, the Snuffy Sternweisses, that are the most rarest cards, although they might not be worth the most money, because a lot of people just they gravitate towards your superstars, your Hall of Famers. Although there are a lot of unauthentic Ted Williams and Mickey Mantles floating out there. I don't suspect that there are any fake Bob Feller cards or Johnny Pesky. But those guys signed forever and a day. So I actually did a video on Snuffy Sternweiss, and unfortunately, he passed away way too young. He was 39 years old, and he was on a train that plunged into the Hudson River, and he died. And it sucks. It really does. He had a couple of young kids. He wasn't playing at that time. He actually also had a heart attack too, prior to his untimely death. So it would have made his autograph even more rarer in that instance because of all of his medical maladies after he stopped playing baseball. And then he had a hard time holding down a job afterwards as well. And so um, for this particular card, though, I do have probably 20, 25 1950 Bowmans that are autographed from the time that this card was issued. From what I'm understanding is that Snuffy Sternweiss does not have a 1952 Topps that's autographed that is known to exist. There are none that I'm aware of, and I've spoken to at least one or two people who specialize in autographs of the 1952 Topps, and from what I'm hearing is that it isn't out there, and if one was out there, it would be actually worth probably more than a autographed Jackie Robinson from that set, which is unbelievable to me. But that just kind of shows you that some of the your lower or lesser stars, I hate to say that word, because every time you go and play baseball for a team like the Yankees or whatever, you are a kind of a star, right? So you're doing something that the majority of people, I'm sure, who love sports would love to do. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here as I always do, but um, I picked up about 20 to 25 of these cards that were autographed at the time from a lawyer who was working on an estate from a elderly lady whose husband had sent out the entire set to be autographed in between 1950 and 1951, and every card that was sent back had a document that stated exactly when the card was sent back and by who. And so that's how I know that these cards here are legit beyond being authenticated by PSA. Is I am biased, however, I I'm not a big fan of graded cards or authentication. I see the cracks in this stuff, and it does worry me. And I think Chris from Stories in Cardboard did a really excellent job at this, and same with Rahul as well. He did a very good job of explaining everything that Chris had found out, and so those two guys really kind of broke something open, and I hope they follow it through and see what actually occurs. And in fact, I would actually like to see PSA issue a statement on why all these cards are delisted, and it's very strange to me. Um, my instinct tells me that somebody has been forging Michael Jordan's autographs and then sending them in to PSA, and then PSA is either A, not taking the time necessary to have an opinion that the cards are either fake or not. Obviously, enough of these got through that PSA graded them as authentic, and now that they are being pulled as well, we don't know why. They're just delisted, which it tells me that they are fake. If PSA has a good explanation as to why this happened with so many of these cards, and it's the cert numbers is what Chris had initially detected was something was off. So kudos to those two guys for bringing this up. And Chris actually had talked to me about this prior to this, and it just there's a lot of mystery around this, and I don't like mysteries. I really don't. Um, anyway, this brings me to the T206 Forgeries, and at the time when I was going for these cards right here, I was doing business with a dealer who specialized in rare autographs, and again, I have a number of these from players who have passed on well prior to the junk wax era. Guys like Mickey Harris and Dizzy Trout and Bob Swift. These guys are they're not household names. They are to me because I study this stuff and I study the ball players, so I know exactly who Bob Swift is and Dizzy Trout. And if you guys don't know who Bob Swift is, he's the catcher who caught Eddie Goodell, the midget ball player that signed a contract to play in 1951 for one game as a stunt, apparently. But he's that catcher, and I believe he was I think he was on the Tigers at that point in time. Anyway, he passed away in 1966, and so this really kind of hit close to home for me when the T206 forgery scandal was in the press. And at the same time, too, it kind of took a back seat, if you will, because there was another scandal too with PWCC and trimming. And so you had both of these going on in about 2018 or so. And today I wanted to read not just the the case as it was in 2018, as described by the press, but also the court document associated with this as well. I want to read that too. This is also very sad too, and it's disgusting. I don't think there's any winners in this, but you'll hear what these guys had to say in these articles. This is from Sports Collectors Daily. Heroes and villains in the fake autographed T206 story as more are uncovered. November 28th, 2018, by Rich Mueller. While the recent exposure of some phony autographs on genuine T206 cards isn't the biggest scandal in hobby history, it may be in the early stages and certainly worth the discussion it's generating. On Wednesday, more fakes emerged, including a Frank Baker, fully authenticated, that sold at auction for over $24,000 just 1 month ago. It is the latest in a growing list of forgeries being outed by collectors who are finding the unsigned matches online, most of which were sold that way in recent past. In all, at least 9 fake signed T206 have been have been discovered. A few observations. The degree of separation between the forger and the person selling the fakes does not appear to be very big. It could even be the same person. At least some of the cards that have been discovered as carrying fake autographs were proven to have been purchased recently. The chain of custody is like very short when you consider the time it takes to receive the unsigned card from the seller, create the forgery, send it off for authentication, and consign it to auction. The buyer of some of the unsigned cards that were uncovered as newly signed forgeries appears to be the same person. The person who benefited from this scheme was incredibly careless, and then profiting from the sale within a few months is just a dumb thing for a crook or crooks to do. Virtually nothing online disappears forever. Nearly everything of recent vintage can be found if you know what you're to search for, and often in a matter of a few minutes. Beyond that, the person who created and/or consigned the fakes and shipped them across state lines likely committed multiple federal crimes. While the forger obviously has enough skills with the pen to fool authenticators, he is no genius. Most convicted of hobby fraud aren't. Leaving such an obvious trail should make this case child's play for law enforcement, which can ask for eBay and Postal Service records, among other things. Finding the problem and exposing it is one thing, though. Punishing the criminal is another. Most of the cards aren't selling for big bucks, and at least this point, it is a small number of items. That could mean the FBI or even local law enforcement agents may not deem it worthy enough to pursue, or it could send up a signal that there is a much bigger problem and an investigation might reveal these fakes are just the tip of a larger ink stained iceberg. Many fraud cases start small and local and wind up big and national. The more fake cards that are uncovered and the more money that's involved in the scam, the more interest investigators will take. At first, it seemed like a recent development, but it appears now as if the T206 signings have been happening for at least 3 years after the discovery of a card bought in 2015 resurfaced as a signed example in a spring 2016 auction. Collectors remain the backbone of the hobby. This entire saga began with one collector reaching out to fellow members of an online vintage card forum for an opinion after his authenticated T206 autograph was rejected by another company. Another member did some online digging and discovered a trail of original low cost cards that now suddenly had autographs and were selling for a lot more. The knowledge base and resourcefulness of experienced collectors is highly underrated. We know at least of one auction company quickly refunded money to the buyer of one of the fakes and paid to have it returned in an effort to find out who was responsible for this existence. Hopefully, others are doing the same. That's how you handle such a problem. For all the complaining about technology ruining the hobby, the internet is playing a central role in this case. Instant communication, trackable photos that can be enlarged with a click, easily accessible auction records are all just part of the great tools we now have that didn't exist until the web became a little more sophisticated. Many years ago, none of what happened would be possible. The faker would continue to fake. Collectors would continue to lose money. This is from Sports Collectors Daily. Ohio man facing federal charges over fake signed T206 cards. May 17th, 2022 by Rich Mueller. Federal prosecutors have charged an Ohio man with bank fraud after they say he purchased T206 cards, added phony autographs, and sold them for hefty profits. In court papers filed in Cleveland last week, acting U.S. Attorney Michelle Bapler charged Cord Monroe of Girard, Ohio, with one count of bank fraud in connection with the case. Investigators say Monroe, aka David Scott, purchased 14 unsigned T206 cards beginning in 2015 and, after fake autographs were added, consigned them to auctions where they sold for thousands of dollars between 2015 and 2017. Based on images shared by collectors who had expressed doubt about the authenticity of some of the cards in an online forum, it is believed most, if not all, had been encapsulated by third-party authenticators. Documents filed in U.S. District Court cited a non-genuine signature of a T206 Eddie Seacott that sold for $12,925 in July of 2017 and another that sold in October of 2018 for $1,250. Prosecutors also referenced Monroe's bank deposits that covered auction proceeds that were issued for a dozen other cards he sold between November 2015 and October 2016, including a group of 4 cards: Nap Rucker, Billy Sullivan, Wid Conroy, and Fred Parent, that resulted in a $26,415 payment, and another group of 2, Frank Baker and Jesse Tannehill, that generated an $18,810 check. Other forged cards cited by the court included Red Murray, Bob Rhodes, and Henny Zimmerman, each of which sold for over $5,000, and cards of Elmer Flick, Fred Snodgrass, and Patty Livingston. The charging documents indicate the 2 auction companies that sold the phony autographs lost over $73,000 after reimbursing buyers. This was filed May 13th, 2022. United States of America versus Cord Monroe, aka David Scott, defendant. General allegations from Judge Lioli and Magistrate Judge Henderson. At all times relevant to this information unless otherwise specified. 1. Defendant Cord Monroe, aka David Scott, resided in Girard, Ohio, in the Northern District of Ohio, Eastern District, and held himself out as a collector and purveyor of baseball cards. 2. T206 baseball cards were a set of baseball cards issued in packs of tobacco products from and around 1909 to and around 1911. 3. Auctioneer 1 was an online auction service headquartered in San Jose, California, that allowed sellers to place items, including unsigned T206 baseball cards, up for auction and interested buyers to bid on the same. 4. Auctioneer 2 was an auction house headquartered in Exton, Pennsylvania, that specialized in collectible sports memorabilia, including signed T206 baseball cards. 5. Auctioneer 3 was an auction house headquartered in Chester, New Jersey, that specialized in collectible sports memorabilia, including signed T206 baseball cards. 6. Bank 1 was a financial institution headquartered in Malvern, Pennsylvania, the deposits of which were insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Auctioneer 2 banked with Bank 1. 7. Bank 2 was a financial institution headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina, the deposits of which were insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. 8. Bank 3 was a financial institution headquartered in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, the deposits of which were insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. 9. Auctioneer 3 banked with Bank 2 and Bank 3. Auction scheme. 10. Defendant purchased unsigned T206 baseball cards from Auctioneer 1. Defendant then forged and caused to be forged signatures of the unsigned T206 baseball cards, purporting to the genuine autograph of the player depicted on the T206 baseball cards. Thereafter, defendant placed these fraudulently created T206 baseball cards containing forged autographs up for auction, with auctioneer 2 holding them out as if they were genuine. 11. On or about November 21, 2016, defendant purchased the following unsigned Jap Barbeau T206 card from auctioneer 1. Thereafter, he forged and caused to be forged Jap Barbeau's autograph on the Barbeau card. 12. On or about October 31st, 2018, defendant listed the forged Barbeau card with auction 2. Defendant falsely and fraudulently represented that the forged Barbeau card was genuine. The forged Barbeau card sold at auction for $1,250.20. 13. On or about March 18, 2017, defendant purchased the following unsigned Eddie Seacott T206 baseball card from auctioneer 1. Thereafter, he forged and caused to be forged Eddie Seacott's autograph on the Seacott card. 14. On or about July 10, 2017, defendant listed the forged Seacott card with auctioneer 2. Defendant falsely and fraudulently represented that the forged Seacott card was genuine. The forged Seacott card sold at auction for $12,925. 15. On or about August 21, 2017, defendant caused auctioneer 2 to issue check number 11885 drawn on Bank 1 in the approximate amount of $18,342, which amount included, amongst other things, the proceeds from the auction of the forged Seacott card. 16. On or about August 29, 2017, defendant cashed check number 11885. 17. On or about the following dates, defendant caused auctioneer 2 to issue checks drawn on Bank 1 in the following amounts as proceeds for the auction of the following forged T206 cards. Approximate date: November 11th, 2015, Red Murray. Approximate check amount: $5,560.25. April 5th, 2016, Elmer Flick. $1,858.40. April 5th, 2016, Henny Zimmerman. $5,733.90. April 5, 2016, Bob Rhodes. $6,325.85. April 5th, 2016, Patty Livingston. $1,390.35. October 10th, 2016, Fred Snodgrass. $1,464.60. 18. On or about the following dates, defendant caused auctioneer 3 to issue checks drawn on the following banks in the following amounts as proceeds for the auction of the following forged T206 baseball cards. Approximate date, November 5th, 2015, Bank 2. Approximate check amount, $18,810. Forged T206. Card, Jesse Tenahill and Frank Baker. May 18th, 2016, Bank 3. Approximate check amount, $26,415. Forged T206 card, Billy Sullivan, Wid Conroy, Fred Parent, Knapp Rucker. 19. Auctioneer 2 lost approximately $35,258.35 as a result of defendant's scheme. 20. Auctioneer 3 lost approximately $38,100 as a result of defendant's scheme. Count 1. Bank fraud. The acting United States Attorney charges 21. Paragraphs 1 through 20 of this information are realleged and incorporated by reference as if fully set forth herein. 22. From or on about July 18th, 2017 to on or about August 29th, 2017 in the Northern District of Ohio, Eastern Division, and elsewhere, defendant Cord Monroe, aka David Scott, knowingly executed and attempted to execute a scheme and artifice to defraud Bank 1, a federally insured financial institution, and to obtain monies, funds, credits, assets, securities, and other property owned by and under the custody and control of Bank 1 by means of false and fraudulent pretenses, representations, and promises, to wit, that the counterfeit CCOT card he placed for auction with Auction 2 was genuine, in violation of Title 18 U.S. United States Code, Section 1344, and this is signed by Michelle Babler, acting United States Attorney, and by Chelsea S. Rice, Chief, White Collar Crimes Unit. I actually happen to think there are a lot more cards that are in this boat by this guy that the FBI or DOJ has not uncovered. And I can remember a series of articles that Anson Whaley from Pre-War Cards did that discussed 1933 and 1934 Gaudis that were forged. And he said that there are probably more cards out there. We just haven't found them. And I think he also said, too, that it appears that there were a lot of play ball and Bowman cards that were forged, too. Now, the one thing that these articles don't mention is actually how the forger did this. And he did it by using 3x5s of the players and copying their autographs onto the cards. Now, what really kind of bothers me about this, there's one player in particular that really kind of raises red flags about the T206s, and that's Jack Warhop, a pitcher with the New York Highlanders, also known as the Yankees. But he's not known to have signed any cards during his lifetime, let alone any kind of autograph. He may be on a ball here and there, but not certainly not an autographed card. And I actually did an article about autographs, and specifically, I broke it down to different generations, if you will. First was the dead ball era guys, and then the second group I broke down was the guys who fought in World War II and played in the 1930s and 40s and maybe early 50s, our greatest generation. And then the third group I studied was the modern guys. And what you're really kind of seeing is that the dead ball era guys, they didn't understand autographs. They didn't understand why somebody would want an autograph. Some of them did autograph. It's very rare, and so what you're seeing is a major uptick from the players from the greatest generation guys like Bob Feller and Johnny Pesky and Dom DiMaggio and Bobby Dorr and all those guys. And then you're seeing more and more guys like Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams and Yogi Berra. And those guys are actually signing later on in life. And most of it is because they're trying to get more money because their pensions are not quite up to snuff, if you will. And so it's a great way for a lot of those older ball players who played back in the late 40s or early 50s or throughout the 1960s to uh, get more money to supplement their pensions. So that's why we're seeing more of those guys, and also the fact that the dead ball era guys by the late 1950s and even into the early 60s, most of those guys were gone. I think your last player from the dead ball era was actually Red Hoff. He lived to be like 107 in 1998, and he's actually the little guy in my website. So he's in the T207 set, 1912, and so he's actually he's actually a very interesting guy. I mention him quite often as being a catalyst for my research into sports cards and the players, and so and to me he's a very important figure. But for the most part, the dead ball era guys started passing away in about like 1940 throughout the 1950s, 60s, and I think maybe the last true like dead ball era Hall of Famer, Rube Marquard, he died in 1980, but he does actually have quite a number of autographs, a lot of autographed cards, and one of those cards actually. That they didn't mention here was a forged Rube Marquard autograph. Whether or not Rube Marquard is actually deserving to be Hall of Famer, I'm not entirely sure. I think a certain book had a lot to do with it. I think this is an incredible thing that first off, you have all these guys who normally wouldn't have autographs on cards, like the dead ball era guys. They all of a sudden have a bunch of autographed T206s. I could see maybe one or two, but to have so many go through PSA and James Spence and Beckett and SGC, and in fact, I think SGC actually closed down their autograph authentication services because of this in I think April of 2019, and I don't think they've started back up again. But somebody over at PSA specifically should have had their antennas up on this because you're seeing guys who are autographed T206 and they're not known to autograph cards during their lifetime, like Jack Warhol. That would have, to me at least, been like, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here? This is very unusual. The other thing, too, is um, usually, I think the grading companies or the authentication companies have lists of all the players' autographs on them, and that's fine. That's great. But at the same time, too, like you're authenticating this stuff, nothing you're not like thinking in the back of your mind like, "Hey, is this how is this legit?" Right? Like we've never seen anything like this. I can understand like you could have like a you know a player who is not known to have autographs all of a sudden have an autograph. Like that wouldn't cause any kind of concern. To me, that seems very irresponsible at least not to have someone double check this, even authenticators, right? So James Spence, he authenticated these things as being good, and Beckett did as well. And obviously, PSA, one of the leading, I guess, standard bearers of authentication, I'm not a big fan of PSA's authentication. I know some horror stories. I'm not going to describe them here, but the other thing that really bothers me about this too is the financial amount here. Um, that that bothers me for a few reasons. One, again, I'm going back to these particular cards. The gentleman that I picked a lot of this stuff up from, outside of the lawyer, um, I I picked up a couple of really rare autographed cards from a dealer who uh, has or sells and buys rare autographed cards, specifically Bowman. Um, he got taken for at least a $13,000 ride on a forged Bowman autograph that he thinks was a part of this scam, and it kind of it makes me think like, okay, like I bought a lot of cards off this gentleman, and he put his reputation on the line to say that this card was legit. I'm not talking about this one; it's a different story here. But other cards from that set in the 1951, and so he put his reputation and his name on the line to say that these cards that he was selling me were legit, and now he has lost out on $13,000 or more, probably $18,000. So I think that there's like um, two different cases with this particular dealer. And again, I'm not going to say his name because it wouldn't be right. But and he's a good guy. He really is. He's fair and he's legit. But again, it goes to show that when it comes to autographs, it's an opinion, exactly what Chris from Stories of Cardboard had said. But you really need to do your homework on this. And um, I would say don't really take a whole lot of things on face value. And what I mean by that is that if something doesn't feel right, walk away from the purchase, right? For me, I thought that these cards are graded. What could be wrong? Obviously, the company PSA graded forged cards as legitimate, and then for whatever reason, or they ended up at auction. Now, somebody at the auction house didn't raise any red flags either. No questions were asked as to, again, who and what are you allowing into your auction. And, there was back in 1999 or so, there was a Ron Oster auction in which a series of presidentially autographed baseballs were up for auction. And they ended up actually being stolen from the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown back in 1972. And these baseballs were actually Walter Johnson's their opening day baseballs that were autographed by the presidents. And so, to me, I'm thinking like, okay, like how many William Howard Taft autographed baseballs are there really? And maybe Warren G. Harding. I mean, Harding died in 1923 of a heart attack, and so there can't be too many of those things floating around. He didn't have a whole lot long to live during his presidency anyway, from like what 1920 to 1923. So right there, wouldn't you ask yourself, how did you get a hold of these baseballs? What's the authenticity? Obviously, they were authentic baseballs, but just the fact that nobody actually did any research to find out where these baseballs came from. And those baseballs were stolen in 1972, I think. And it wasn't reported until 1977 when Hank Thompson, who is Walter Johnson's grandson, he and his mother actually went to, I believe, the Hall of Fame in 1977, and they found out that the baseballs were not there. And they're like, where are they? And the Hall of Fame lied about it. As far as I'm concerned, they lied. They said that they were in storage when they weren't. And, there's other cases as well. So, in Massachusetts, where I am from, we've had every single institution pilfered at least once. Even, the State House has been pilfered of its documents, and a lot of those documents have ended up on auction houses. I, even in California, they found Massachusetts documents that should be in the State House up for auction. Even the state charter they found at auction. And then you also have the Isabella Stewart Gardner case from 1990. That's paintings, but it's still, you know, you also have the Boston Public Library as well, where a gentleman was stealing maps from the map room, and he had a device on him where he could roll them up and put them down his pants and walk out with them. And so he was doing that for quite a number of years. And then they also found too that during an audit, which in fact they didn't do an audit since 1986, and this is quite recent too that this happened within a couple of years ago. So they found that during an audit that their gold coin collection was also missing too. And then there's also another case from the New York Public Library, which they had a bunch of cards that were from 1863, the first known sports cards from 1863. Those were also stolen too and ended up at auction house. And so you have some crazy, crazy stuff that has ended up at auctions. And the last will and testament of Connie Mack. Well, there's only two places that you're gonna find that, and one of them is at the Philadelphia Records Department, and that's where that was stolen along with other last will and testaments. And then you have the whole Barry Halper stuff too, and I've discussed about Barry Halper and his collection at length, and there was a lawsuit about that too, and the lawsuit's kind of fun to read. Well, from me anyway, because I love reading that stuff. I think it's really fascinating. Other people they may be put to sleep, and it's not good for a first date with a lady. I can tell you from personal experience, like, oh, hey, look at the time. I gotta go. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think about this. I'd love to get your thoughts. And this gentleman, Cord Monroe, he's up for I guess um, his case is going up for trial. And in the meantime, I've heard actually that they wanted to do like a 90-day observation on him to check his sanity. I think he's sane enough because if he's well versed to know about these players and their habits, then he's sane enough. But here's the funny thing too is just thinking about this is that these for the most part, these are not players that are very well known, and it should have raised red flags to the people who were authenticating these cards, and that's really was very astounding to me. Is that you're not looking at like Ty Cobb autograph or Walter Johnson or who else was big back in the the dead ball era. So it's not your major stars. And to me, I would think that if you're into collecting or autograph from the dead ball era, you would know who signed and who didn't. And usually again it's your big stars. Christy Mathewson, by the way, he didn't understand autographs at all, and he very rarely signed autographs during his lifetime. There are other players like that too. Bobby Thompson, for the New York Giants, the shot heard around the world in 1951. I spoke to him on numerous occasions, and we actually just talk about like other things other than baseball. 9/11 always came up in conversations and all that, but I asked him about autographs and how he felt about them one day, and he said he didn't like to sign autographs at all. He said he didn't feel comfortable about it. He didn't understand why somebody would want his autograph. And here's a member of the greatest generation, and he said basically, he's like, all I did was hit a home run. Turns out that that home run, he saw the sign, the signal for it, and he hit that home run because of the signal. Now I didn't bring that up with him ever. I didn't want to embarrass him at all. He was a nice guy to me, and he actually did sign a few things. Most of my autographs, though, are not on cards. They're actually in lieu of payment for the artwork that I've done for the ball players or their family. So again, guys, thanks so much for stopping by. I greatly appreciate this. I am very bothered by this, by the way, because I think there are more cards out there that just haven't been found yet that are forged, either T206, and these may actually be the only ones that he has admitted to. And again, why would you admit to other forgeries that you haven't been found yet? You know, I wouldn't do it. You know, but you never know. And again, this is a federal crime too. What bank fraud is federal, and I don't know if they got them on wire fraud, but they could get them on wire fraud too. And you know, for each and every single card that has gone through either a bank or a post office. So the there may be, you know, there could be more charges brought against this guy. I don't know, and I don't know uh, what the sentencing is going to be. Apparently, he's going to be sentenced soon. I'm not entirely sure when, and I'll probably tell you guys when that's going to happen. I'm actually surprised that it took this long, in fact, for this case to go forward because this actually happened between 2015 and 2019. So, you know, so then you have in the pandemic, okay, but you know, what was the cyber crimes division of the FBI doing? The famous but incompetent FBI, and you know, people in Boston are not happy with the FBI for Whitey Bulger reasons. But that's not the story, and neither here nor there, I guess. But you know, we have long memories here too, with the FBI, and then you know the FBI stealing Civil War gold in Pennsylvania. That's a good one, guys. That's awesome. Thanks, FBI. And then lying about it too. And the FBI, don't even get me started on those creeps. They'll probably come after me for this too, right? Probably audit me or something stupid like that, or follow me or bug my phone or whatever, because they're into that shit. Anyway, guys, again, thank you so much for stopping by. If you don't see me again, it's because the FBI got me. But you know, I really want to hear what you guys have to say about this, and what do you think? Because I'd love to get your take. I'm really kind of pissed off at this, and I feel bad for everybody who's been scammed by this guy. And but he wasn't alone either. I think it was the greed of auction houses. It was their incompetence as well, and they didn't take the time necessary to do the investigation on these cards as they should have, or the time, in fact. And this is, you know, again, one of the other reasons why that you need to take your time and you need to do research on what you are buying, and especially in the hobby because you can be taken for thousands and thousands of dollars very easily. And you know, again, the hobby in, initiates a lot of emotions for the people who are collecting. You can just ask Billy Crystal about the 1961 game used Mickey Mantle glove that ended up being circa 1958. He got his money back, but these auction houses really don't do their due diligence as they should. And there's actually another story that you guys might like to check out. It's a documentary called Sour Grapes, and it's about a forger of wine, in fact, and he sold his vintage wine bottles to an auction house, and they sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it turned out that, well, I don't want to ruin it for you guys. If you haven't seen the documentary, go and check it out. So, all right, I've been yapping here for long enough, and I will talk to you guys later. Have a good one. Bye. So I actually think there's a lot more cards out there that they didn't get. First off, Anson Whaley from pre-war, yeah, pre-war cards. Barf. That's not gonna make prime time.